Very happy to welcome Maggie Horsfield, the Deputy Mayor of the City of North Bay, to the show. Almost called you Mags because of your Instagram. I see it a lot. So, welcome to the show, Maggie. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Scott. No, I really appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to this chat.
That's great. So, as I mentioned, sort of off air, let's call it, a lot going on in your life. New-ish baby, let's call him new-ish now. And you also have been in council for how long now? 3 years? Two
That year
years?
and a half going.
Is
This is
that
our
it?
second. This is our. I know it feels like it's been a lot longer. Not going
Maybe
to
I'm the
lie.
one with mum
Yeah.
brain. I don't know.
No, but technically we did start in 2022, but it was at the end of the year. So 2023 was our first full year, and now we're into our second full year.
So, what has been the bigger adjustment? Parenthood or city council? I'm sure there's
Yeah,
children
that's
in both. That's all I'll say. But
yeah. I would say um, parenthood because it stays with you forever. Council, at least I know there is an end date, for at least a term kind of thing. There's a date that we work towards and that we have an encapsulated time period. With parenthood, every day is different, and some days you wish for that time to go quicker, and other days you wish for it to slow down or to go back to a previous phase that the baby was in. But it's something that I've signed up for life, and I think for me that's the big adjustment is this isn't just you know a job that I can leave at the end of the day or change or um, you know move on from. It's something that I've committed myself to for the rest of my life. So I think actually motherhood is the biggest adjustment.
I probably knew that answer, but I had to ask it anyway. Uh,
No,
and
it's a good question.
and the other thing is that not you're responsible for another life.
Hmm.
You can't just it's Sunday night, let's go out for a drive or a whatever. You have to think about the little one. So it changes every aspect of every day of your life, like you said.
It's 24/7. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about yourself and your journey into politics. At what point did you decide that this was something that was going to interest you, as becoming involved in municipal politics?
I think I've always been interested in being involved with organizing groups. I would say is where I started in high school and in grade school, just being a part of those student councils where we would help more so organize events and activities for other students. I've always kind of lent myself to wanting to help with doing things for others. But with municipal council, that really kind of started to grow on me in the last election, which would have been 2018. I was starting to pay a lot more attention and realized I was staying in North Bay post university graduation. So I was going to put my roots here. And I was watching what was happening. And I thought, is this something I'd want to get involved in and be a part of that change or be a part of those decisions and activities? But at that time, I wasn't fully settled yet, and I didn't really know if I was ready for it. So I decided in 2018 I was going to pay attention a lot more, and so I'd watch the council meetings, and then they went into COVID, so it was an interesting shift, I would say, for last council term to see what municipal politics looks like from a pandemic perspective, and how that response and those roles change. And I just paid a lot more attention. And I would say that it was during that term that I decided, I think I want to throw my name in the hat, see what happens. If I'm one of the ones chosen, great. If not, I still have a job. I still have other ways I can get involved in the community. But if I don't try, I will never know if it's meant for me or if I'll even make it in.
And So are you born and raised in North Bay and educated in North Bay at Nipissing University, correct?
Yes, I am a through and through North Bayite. I do have to admit, though, there were times where I thought I'm leaving. It's I think crosses everyone's mind, no matter where you live, that maybe this isn't where I want to spend all my time. Maybe I'm missing out on something by not living in Ottawa or a larger urban center. Is this all there is, or is this where I want to be? And I had that question pop up when I was finishing high school. I thought I'm going to go to another university, try that out. Ended up staying and choosing Nipissing and being like, okay, this was actually a good decision. I wasn't fully ready yet. And then after finishing university, same thing. Okay, now I have to go get a job, like a big job and an official job, and there's nothing for me here, was kind of my thought without even exploring the opportunities. And was quickly surprised and ended up working at the university upon graduation and haven't looked back since. So it's North Bay's been my home my entire life. My mom's side of the family did settle in North Bay, an area back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. So I do have some family that does extend in the area and in the city for a number of years. And then my father's family's from Niagara Falls.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Mattawa,
Yeah.
just down the road. And I know exactly what you mean about that. And I think every young person at that age, when you're, getting out of high school into post-secondary or whatever you're going to do, there's always that wanderlust there, I think, to explore the world. And I think it's natural, and I think it's obviously very healthy. I moved away from Mattawa when I was in my mid 20s, so what years ago. um, but couple of years ago, I decided, you know what, it's time to go back
Mm-hmm.
for a few reasons. And I'm living in Powassan now, which is also just down the road the other way.
Yeah.
But I couldn't be happier to be back here. And I think that's this common story for a lot of people born and raised in the north. You seem to want to get away, but then eventually you're going to want to come back.
Yeah, it holds on to you and it just says, you know what, I'll let you go and try out Southern Ontario, Eastern Ontario, go out west. Yes, go see the mountains. But then there's something about the allure, the lifestyle, the people that will always take you back, I think. And that sometimes we want to have a taste of something different, but then we realize that, sometimes we did have it pretty good.
The grass is not always greener on the other
Yeah,
side,
exactly.
as they say. I noticed that I moved. I didn't go back down south for about probably 6 months after leaving here, and as soon as I hit Aurelia, the traffic. It's like I am not. It's only been 6 months. I am not used to this anymore,
Yep.
and because I'm used to driving down Highway 11. Kind of semi cognizant of what's going on. But hopefully, there's no police listening. But but yeah, driving back down there, it was
Mhm.
just I was like almost white knuckling it because I so quickly lost my bearings for that kind of lifestyle. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I made the right decision to come back.
I know what that's like. It's and I find too it's always fun now when I drive down to Toronto for the weekend, let's say, and I see the lineup of traffic coming north for the weekend and I have no traffic going south and it's smooth sailing and then, reverse as I'm heading back north and they're trying to get back into the city and there's all that traffic. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of nice that being in North Bay and in the area, our traffic is like a snowplow or,
Yeah.
might add 5 minutes to your drive kind of thing. And we're like, oh my gosh, like the
Took me
traffic
30
today.
minutes instead of 25. What's going on?
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of an hour versus 2 hours type of thing. So, when you put it into the perspective of having that balance too, coming home for lunch, it's
Mm.
something that I always do when I'm working. I try to take that break during the day. Whereas I know some people, they get up and they leave for work at 5 a.m. and they don't get home till 6 p.m. and there's no going home in between. And It's just a lot of things that you kind of realize you get to have more balance when you live in the north and in the area.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Each to their own, but I
Hmm.
cannot imagine living the life where you leave the house at 6, you come back at 6, you maybe have a shower, dinner, and then it's time to go to bed.
Exactly,
And
and
it's
do it
like,
all again.
and do it all again. It just
Yeah,
seems like such a hamster wheel that I could personally not do.
yeah.
I don't think I would last very long. So, were you as a young person, early teenage years into high school, were you a very civic minded? You mentioned, you were involved in like school councils and so on, organizing committees. Were you very civic minded? Did you have a lot of pride for your community back then, or was that something that sort of grew as you got older?
I, when I reflect back, I do think that I had some inkling, understanding of basic understanding of how federal, provincial, and municipal governments work. Um, but I think with time, I've really honed in and understood more, and actually went and sought out more understanding about how our electoral system works in Canada and the province and municipally, the roles of government, and just the layers that you can really peel away to understand it. I remember, fondly in high school, I learned a lot about American history and the American system, and it's so fascinating in some ways how the United States came to be, how their electoral system came to be, what the original premise was versus what it looks like today and how it's being interpreted today, and even a lot of that um, desire to learn about the system and the systems of government didn't come out until I was in university. And I decided to take history when I went to Nipissing. But then I was taking some political science classes because I had electives I needed to fill in my course schedule. And I thought political science, history, I find this topic
Tied
interesting.
together, yeah.
Exactly. And it goes, it's married well. But then I ended up loving the topics and loving the professors and just the debate and the conversations and the information we were learning. And so I ended up doing a double major in history and political science, even though that wasn't my original intention, but it worked so well together. And it was really in university that I was able to understand even like back in, Greek and Roman history, how politics and working as a community and working as a civilization and the interactions between different regions and different countries and the evolution of that really sets us up for where we are today and how we are as a country and as a people, and looking at world events with that different lens. So it's always been, just so interesting, I find, to learn about those things. And I know not everyone, some people like to stay away from those topics, which I totally respect. But for me, I always find it really interesting how humans interact and how humans come together to form community, the greater good, and work as a collective for everyone.
And if you think about it, really, the whole concept of democracy is not that old in the
No.
grand scheme of the planet. And so, you think, oh, it's been a few hundred years. That seems like a long time. But to develop a system of, politics and a system of governance like that over the last few hundred years really is an incredible accomplishment that isn't really followed even now worldwide the way people I think it is, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense.
No, for sure. Yeah, and then you look at even Canada is an even younger country in its formation than the United States and a lot of North America and South America based on um, when it was discovered, and just how that's been the foundation for what we think is the most appropriate form of government is based on what we know. But the systems in Europe and in Africa and in Asia, they go back, and their foundation goes back a lot longer, and it's just evolved so much. But for us, even in Canada, being a Commonwealth country and having a monarchy that's overseas, and how that's different than even the United States, and it's it can really, you can always learn so much about how those systems have created the way we think about politics and about community, and where we are today.
And it shows when I'm not going to make this a big military war thing, but when countries like the United States go into a country like, let's say, Iraq, for example,
Mm-hmm.
the whole regime change thing. It's okay. Here's democracy, and what do you expect them to do with it? They don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So how do you expect a people to suddenly say, okay, well, we're a democracy now, let's go out and vote? It's just,
Yeah.
it's chaos because they don't know what it
And
is.
putting it on them, not letting them decide, but thinking we
We
somehow
know
know
best.
better. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And here, we like this. We're going to impose it on you because we think that it will benefit you. There might be some ulterior motives on our end as well to wanting you to be the same as we are. But yeah, and I find I look at those examples like that, and I think about how, even an organization or a business, like if from the top down, or if an outsider comes in and says, this is how we're doing it now. And if you don't have the buy-in from the people, the core group, the workers that make up that organization or business, you're going to have battles, you're going to have losses, you're going to lose people who aren't going to work there, you're going to have pushback. And that culture at a workplace can really be dictated by how it's being imposed on them. And you think of a country, if you come in and say, this is how we're doing it, but they've never done it that way, and your approach is just, they'll eventually conform. There's going to be challenges and roadblocks. And if it's not done the right way for the right reasons, is it going to really work?
Mm-hmm. I remember back in, I want to say, I'm dating myself again. Probably, I think it was 2000. It was 2004 actually, because that was the year my son was born. So I did a lot of work for Elections Ontario and Elections Canada. So I would do the IT for the returning offices, and so on. And back in 2004, we had a delegation from Iraq come into Elections Ontario, was showing them how we run elections.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so interesting to me. It was like, how to run elections? What do you mean? To us, it's just so natural. To them, it was just completely 100% new. They had to, because obviously Saddam Hussein wasn't a big
Mm-hmm.
fan of democratic elections.
Exactly. Yeah. You mean
And
you can't stand outside and intimidate and threaten people and make
they
them
get a
not want to
choice.
come out? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
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 And so just seeing these people learning our system, it was really a surreal experience, because something that we take for granted so much that was just foreign to them
Mm-hmm.
was really neat to see.
Yeah. And then even further from the way we do it, there's countries that give the people the day off so that it's not a, can you make it work around your schedule? Is
We
it an
should do that.
inconvenience? Exactly. Like, should it be on maybe not a Sunday, because there's also, but maybe it should be a weekend, or maybe it should be a certain period of time with one day dedicated. Everyone gets off, gets paid, to give everyone that option, because how can we remove more barriers? And other countries have figured it out, and they look at us and go, you don't get the day off to vote, type of thing. And it's like, no. And so on that other end, there's more even that we could do to help encourage people to feel engaged.
And looping back around to what we talked about, the guy who, or the woman who works, leaves the house at 6, gets home at
Mm-hmm.
6, whatever. Now there is advanced poll voting and so on. And I always say, if you really want to vote, you will
You
make it
make it work.
happen.
Yeah.
But I also believe that we should take as many barriers as possible away and make it a day off. I mean,
Yeah.
there's really not much more important than choosing who's going to run your country. So
Exactly. Yeah. And, when you hear people say, well, I didn't vote because I didn't think my vote would make a difference, it's like, the amount of people that said that, your vote
would have
would have
made a
made a
difference.
difference.
Absolutely.
If you all actually voted, it
Mm-hmm.
would make a difference. And I remember I was at a polling station during the last provincial election, and a young gentleman came in. He had just gotten off work across the street, and thought, oh, the polling station's just across the street. I can go there. And they said, nope, this isn't your polling station. And by the time it would take him to get home or get to the part of town he lived
Mm-hmm.
in to reach his polling station,
Too
he
late.
wouldn't be able to cast a vote. But meanwhile, he was literally on the doorstep of a polling station, but it
Right.
wasn't his. And, I do understand there are certain logistics that come with being able to vote at different locations, but in this day and age, with this amount of technology, um, access to internet, to be able to live update when someone walks into a polling station to vote, there's just so many reasons that these barriers should be able to be eliminated so that everyone's vote does count, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone can have that chance, and that there isn't, any excuses that aren't in the control of those barriers.
I've learned so much about the election and the not so much the political process, but the election process from doing that job over. First time I did it was 2003, so I did it for almost 20 years, and I used to sit at home because I was all election night, even as a kid, didn't know what the hell was going on, but just
No.
who's going to win? It was almost like a sporting event to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the red team or I like the blue team, whatever. But I remember always thinking, there's only 10% of the ballots counted. How can they tell who has won?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was always a little suspicious for me. But then working behind the scenes and seeing those live counts come in and being in that war room when all the polling stations are phoning with their totals,
Mm-hmm.
you can see patterns. You can start to see, and you start to know, oh, this area is a little more liberal, so they might catch up a bit. This area is a little more conservative. So by the time I was done, I was like, okay, I can predict this myself now. It's just really fascinating how that whole process works.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember, when Mulclair was the leader of the NDP federally, there was that big shift, big shakeup. And so the predictions were so off because what the historical information that was known behind the scenes in the war rooms about where things were, where people voted, were just so off because people actually really changed their vote because of what was happening. And so they had to kind of go, actually, we were wrong. And it was very similar with Trump and Clinton, that prediction that there's no way that he could win. And then, oh gosh, like we were wrong. There's that element of there, you can predict, but if there is really that much disruption to want to see a change in
Yeah, voter
leadership.
anger is a powerful thing.
Exactly. And I'm really interested to see how this next federal election is going to play out. I think it could, we could really see that voter anger, and voter just wanting to see that change, or maybe not. And maybe we're all just thinking like there's going to be a big shift, and maybe people just aren't there yet. But I've been pretty fascinated watching this, the federal moves on the chessboard lately.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, never say never because, truth, all cards on the table. I am a conservative voter and I would like to see Pierre win. And I see the polls and everyone's getting excited. And I'm like, no, not so fast. It's not over till it's over,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens as well. And this time, like you were mentioning with Mulcair and also with Jack Layton,
Mm-hmm.
the NDP had an option that was palatable to a lot of people. And I don't know if Mr. Singh quite has that at this point.
Yeah.
So it's just going to be interesting to see what happens. Who knows it's still a long ways away in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And I find there's differences too with like the federal, even provincial, and then municipal politics, and how voters are swayed or interested, right? And sometimes it's just the person, like when it comes to federal, it's like the prime minister. Like, we can set aside policy and stances on things. It's the person in that seat that people will almost want to vote for over anything else. Whereas provincially, there can be something really near and dear to your heart that will sway you in that way. And then municipal, it's so close to
Even more
the
local.
people, that it can literally be you voted last election or during your last term
To
on
chop down
council,
the cherry tree in the park.
and I will never vote for you again,
Mhm.
and it's so interesting how these, even within politics and in government, just the what will actually get people to vote. And one thing can happen and all of a sudden you're thinking the polls are looking great, and then there's this scandal revealed, or there's the war room on the other side has actually unleashed this campaign. And I remember with Justin Trudeau, it was his hair. Like, they tried to go in. It's just like, his hair is going to sway this election. Like, is this really where we're at? And it's so interesting what can sway on all levels the votes.
And as you zoom out further, like you said, from municipal to provincial to federal, you're voting more and more on issues that you really probably don't understand all that well.
Mm-hmm.
Like inflation. Okay, I hate inflation. Yay, everybody does. What do you do? I don't know. I'm not an economist.
What's the options? Yeah.
I have no idea. So I trust the people that I'm going to be electing to take care of that. Whereas, like you said, municipally, it could be someone that, saved a historic building and, people want to vote for him or her for that reason. It's much
Yeah.
more of a microcosm of your actual life when you're voting for something in your own city.
Yeah. And I find too, now being on council here, it's a lot of times people might not even know who they should be contacting. And so being municipal and being that almost first point of contact, or the easiest to contact, or the person that's supposed to represent me kind of approach, people will reach out and say, I am really disappointed that there's no funding for this specific agency in town. It's like, well, they're actually funded through the province. And it's like, well, you represent the province. And it's like, well, no, the municipal government represents this. And so a lot of times it ends up being a bit of trying to educate without being like a condescending, or trying to like lay blame somewhere else.
Pass the buck.
It's
Yeah.
exactly, it's not to say like, oh, I can't deal with that, but it's actually not in my realm as a municipality. Like, I thought, even when I was looking at running municipally, it's like, I'm going to change the world. But on some levels, it's actually, I'm going to change the roads and the water and the, like a lot of those, the parks, like a lot of local things. If I really want to change policy that dictates bigger change, you see that happen at the other levels of government, because when it's something that might affect all the municipalities in Ontario, and something that needs to be considered on higher levels, and like the housing policy, or healthcare, it's been assigned, I guess, not the right word, but it's the responsibility of other levels to fill in those voids. So it's always been interesting when I go, I agree with you. I really wish we had more family doctors here. Here's the challenges. Here's the ministry that's looking into it, who's responsible, whatever you want to say. Here's what I can kind of do, but at the same time, you need to organize, you need to reach out, and you can voice your displeasure, but also do you have any solutions? Do you have any ideas? That's also going to help, because we can all be disappointed with something or not in agreement. But unless you have, like you were saying with inflation, you might do you have another suggestion for how we handle it? Is there any other things we can do that would change the way that things are happening, that we can actually get tangible different outcomes from? I think that's where some people are like, well, I don't want to do the work. That's you.
Mm-hmm.
You municipal councillor, go and I've given you my grievances. Now you go and advocate for that change on my behalf. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's bringing people along to be like, no, like you should own this. If you really want to see this change, you should also step up. I can step up and help and, be a conduit as well, but you can do it too.
So let's talk about the city of North Bay specifically for a minute, although this probably applies to a lot of other places. Are you a proponent of the ward system? Because the way I see it, again, I'm interested in politics. I've never been involved or anything. I'm just a layman. But like you mentioned with people, when who do I contact? Because this affects my neighborhood. So this is going to be nothing to nobody, to people that don't know North Bay, but the far end of Lakeshore Drive is a lot different from Airport Road.
Mm-hmm.
So are you a proponent of the ward system to have councillors representing a certain area in the city, or or do you prefer the current sort of at-large system?
It's a great question. I've always been interested in seeing and thinking about what would North Bay look like if we were a ward system. And so would we benefit from it? Would it maybe create more divides? It could very much help people know who represents their area of town. But what would be the cons as well? And I've also thought, well, maybe a hybrid system. So maybe you have larger wards and have, since there's 10 councillors, let's just throw it out there. This is just me spitballing too, not speaking on behalf of council. I just want to say.
I'll put that disclaimer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is all Maggie's opinions and thoughts. These does not represent any decisions. But let's just say there's the 10 of us. So 5 were wards and then 5 at large. Okay, so then you have 5 people that represent every area and then 5 at large, or maybe 2 per ward based on their size. But then you also have those that, once they're elected, are only going to want to maybe represent their ward or their neighborhood. And so when they see that another neighborhood is getting a new park this year because it's been in the plans that this is the next park that's going to be updated because of its age and it's just where we're at. Well, no, I'm not going to support that because the people in my neighborhood want their park updated, even though it's not on the list, it's not as bad. There can be, and we see it in other municipalities, and that's why I kind of bring that up. You do see that people won't often think about the city or their community as a whole, the now even smaller view of my neighborhood, because also if I want to get reelected by the people in my even smaller numbers, I have to do what they want me to for their neighborhood. So I've heard from other communities that there's some that even the wards get, based on their size, they get even money that they get to spend on activities that they get to do in their ward. And they save it up for the last year of their term. And then suddenly your ward counselor is putting on all these barbecues and activities in your ward and such great community.
Handing out re-elect Joe Smith buttons.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and then if you really want to see change, you get to choose maybe one person. And so if you actually want to see change at council and change at your municipal level, you went from being able to choose your entire council to choosing 1, 2 kind of thing. And so It's I have heard also, just to kind of put one more thought out there, that there's a lot of municipalities that are ward systems that want to get out of it.
Mm.
But then there's also people who are like, oh no, I've been my ward counselor for 20 plus years and I have no problem getting elected. It's a great gig.
Maybe
I'm
that's a
never
good
going to
reason to
support
do it, to get rid of
at
it.
large. Exactly. Whereas you have people who are now saying, well, no, like we want to be able to see change and not have to fight against someone who's been in there for so long. So I'm always interested in seeing what the community wants to see happen, but I think they need to also be informed about the pros and cons. Like,
Hmm.
yes, you're going to maybe know this person is going to care about my neighborhood because they live in it. But, just because I live in this neighborhood doesn't mean I don't care about the people who live in West Ferris or who live on Trout Lake or who live
Mm.
downtown. Like, I'm just on the outskirts of downtown. So you have to want to care about everyone in the city because you represent everyone.
Hmm.
I think there could be better ways to be, hey, if you have also with wards, like that's your ward counselor. That's the only person you can reach out to. If they don't agree with you, they're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
Our council, there's 10 of us. I might not agree with you and say, no, I'm not moving that to the next person. You might find another counselor who'll say, yeah, I want to take on this and move it forward. So you actually end up with, in some ways, more representation
Hmm.
than you would in a ward system. So there's that pros and cons. It's really someone will make a point. I'll be like, that's a good point, and then someone else will make a point. I'm like, no, that's a really
So
good
is
point
that.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why I'm like, well, would a hybrid be a good system, or would you know, is it working? And it's just that we think, we see in the last election a 6-person turnover of the 10. Would you see that in a ward system?
Yeah, I
Um,
would think probably not.
Not to that potentially to that same level. So it can really vary. And there's some days where I'm like, I'd be interested, and other days where I'm like, no, like this might be the best
Best way.
format that we have. Yeah.
And they even go through that at the federal level, talking about changing first past the post to
Mhm.
proportional representation. And I'm no Justin Trudeau fan. He takes a lot of flack because he promised to look into that.
Yeah.
That's not a small undertaking. That's not something that you just, okay, let's do it and everybody's happy. That's changing the fundamental way that we elect our representatives is a massive undertaking that should take years and years and years.
Exactly. Because to even get that into the position that be ready to like to roll out, he could have said, yep, we're doing it, and it still would take this many years to roll it out. So there could be a lot of work taking place in the background that we don't know about to get us in the position to be able to do that, that you don't want to share too soon, because sharing it too soon, the expectations, promising it, the expectations, but working towards it, how can we do that? And it would be a massive shift for the better.
Maybe.
We tend to seem to think so, but they need to do their due diligence with their staff and their workers to make sure that they think about all the scenarios, how it could be potentially interfered with, how it could, what would it look like, not just for their own party getting elected, but um, in the definition of democracy and elections.
And even when you roll it out, it's still going to be how many years until you have any real data as to whether it was the right move or not. You're going to
Hmm.
need how many elections that happen every 4 years? That could be decades before you even know if it was successful.
Yeah, and in the city of North Bay, like we implemented the electronic voting, and I forget what it was. They went off of the impact data, I think, for knowing households and people who lived in it, sending out the voter cards. but their information from MPAC wasn't up to date. And so, like there's people going, my child hasn't lived here in 15 years and they got a voter card. Yes, it might be illegal for them to vote, but how can you prove that they voted or didn't vote here? And then now all the data got cleaned up because of this election. And then we find out, okay, now we're going to actually use the Government of Ontario's database for the next municipal election. So it's like, you think you've cleaned up the data and it's going to be good and whatnot, and then something changes again. And it's like, oh, okay, we're going to be back to square one at the next election with our data, and you're going to get another voter card for your child that moved out 19 years ago at this point, because we're now, and you're going to be upset because you updated that information last election. Well, sorry, we're getting this data now from another. It's just, there's so many layers that would need to be unraveled for those types of big changes.
For sure. And I'm laughing because working in the election business for a while, I saw that every time, what you just said. And, sometimes people would have a sense of humor. Oh, I got a, card for my brother again. He isn't, like you said. But sometimes it's not so funny, because we had, 2 or 3 times a lady whose son was tragically killed in a motorcycle accident at 19, and she kept getting voters cards for him. And all I could say was, oh my God, I'm so sorry. We strike you from our database here. It uploads it to Elections Ontario. But then, like you said, the next election, they bring more data in and it comes back, and it's just, so if we're having trouble with that aspect of it still, the rest of it's going to be a challenge.
Oh yeah, and that's the heartbreaking hard part, right? Is like, oh, that's my husband. He passed away. It's been 8 years. You call me every election and you remind me, and it's like, yep.
Yeah. What else can you say?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. Yep. You can try and pass the buck or blame or give an explanation, but really the way that they're feeling, it's like, I would feel the exact same way. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to strike it again, and let's hope that this time it's
the last
struck. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first question I asked you about your interest in politics and so on, you mentioned that you didn't think you were ready initially. So let's fast forward. You get elected. First day in council. Were you ready?
I think my experience too is interesting, because I ran hoping to get elected, and I ended up with the most votes, which was not like, it wasn't where I thought I might fall. I had no idea, quite frankly, if I was going to get elected, where I'd fall in the gambit of the 10 of us. So seeing my name make it to the top of the list and then stick was like, oh, okay, yep. And this is seeing the community come behind me to support me. Okay, yep, they're there. They believe in me. I can do this. But at the same time too, there's that disbelief that's, that internal struggle of imposter syndrome, like, are they sure they voted for the right Maggie Horsfield? Was there, like, kind of thing, was, did they vote for the wrong, did they accidentally, should I be here? Am I meant, there's all those questions that still do come up, and it's really natural to feel those ways about being in a position like that. And so it took me a little while, but I did feel a lot of outpouring of support from family, friends, people that voted for me that I had only met through the election process, that were just over the moon to see me be elected as deputy mayor as well. I was just like, okay, I'm meant to be here. I can do this. And I felt the support immediately from the mayor. He said, like, he and I had known each other and crossed paths through our work in previous years, and we had worked together on some things. So we knew each other to an extent. So it was like, okay, like, I can see we can make this work. There's a lot of new counselors. And I think that actually really helped with that transition into being on city council was there was so many new councilors as well that it wasn't just one or two of us who had to catch up or to get acquainted with how things were done. The majority of council,
6 of you in the same boat.
yeah, needed to be brought up to speed. So immediately, the city staff were great in having education sessions. I forget at this point, mom brain, but they were weekly, sometimes twice weekly, 3 times, I believe, at some points. We'd go in for a few hours every night and just learn about how the city operates, how the council meetings operate, having the staff right there to answer our questions, going through scenarios, understanding the role of council, the role of staff, the role of everyone who works at the organization. But then even then, to then go through the motions of going to meetings, preparing my own speaking notes, recognizing that what I say will make it to the media, and how is it interpreted? How am I being clear in what I'm saying? Can it be chopped into a sound bit that doesn't sound great? That's actually not what I was saying, but sounds good for the story. So learning even more how to communicate clearly and effectively, and making sure that when I said something, if I say, this is when it's happening, you can guarantee it, you can bet, money on it. That's a pretty bold statement to make in politics, to make any sort of guarantees. So understanding that timelines and commitments and promises carry the weight that they should, frankly, that people expect. And I would say it took a little while, but the support was there from both at the city, but also with the community and other people I connected with. So when we started going to budgets with the city, being able to sit down with city staff to say, explain to me your process. This is, over $100 million. I can try and compare it to my household budget or to a business's budget. But then again, there's government funding. That's tied, as you know, through your workplace. Like if you get this funding from the government, you can use it for this purpose only, or you have to match it with this, or user fees can only cover this amount. They can't do this. All those other layers of what goes in. And so speaking to colleagues at organizations of like sizes that receive government funding plus user fee type funding, and how it works and how they've managed it. It's busy, but it was so challenging in a good way. It made me think critically and try and put on different lenses and hats and perspectives, and recognize that I am one counselor. There's 9 other counselors and a mayor. Majority wins, passes. So how can we work together? Do you vote on things because you feel pressure versus it's the right thing to do versus thinking long term and short term? There's a lot of reflection. And I think that was very clear from the beginning too, is that don't make promises you can't keep. And it's okay to say, let me think about that, and to reflect and to consult before you do make any statements.
So let's go to election night. So you're running for council, and all of a sudden it looks like, oh my God, you're going to be the deputy mayor. Was there a point in the night that you thought, oh boy, now I was trying to gear myself up for council, and now I've got to gear myself up for deputy mayor? What's involved in that? What do I have? Blah blah blah. Like, was there a moment in at some point in the whole process that kind of
It
clicked over
changed.
from council to deputy mayor?
Yeah, I actually ended up going to City Hall with my parents and my husband because I thought, I had debated just waiting at home, watching it on Kojiko, and I thought, I kind of want to go check out what it's like at City
Be
Hall to
involved,
see
yeah.
it kind of comes in. And this year was different too because of when the polls were submitted, it was across Ontario, so we were put in a queue with all the other
Oh,
polls
okay.
that came in. So it was very slow to get the results. I don't know if you recall it all at all, but like one poll came in, two more polls came in, an hour
Mm,
later, five polls. Like it was very slow. Like we thought it'd be a lot faster because of the um, option to vote online, but because the polls were put into a queue with all kinds of other polls, they were it was slow. So
mhm.
it took a little while to know. I think there's 15 polls if I remember, and so you see one, and I think I was sitting eighth or so, and I was like, oh, okay.
Okay,
But
yeah.
that can really change. Like this is only the
Oh,
first
yeah.
couple polls. Like, don't get my hopes up.
Or
And then
down.
all of a sudden, yeah, all of a sudden, a big influx of polls came in, and I think I jumped pretty early to the first. It's also kind of a blur because I still like it was so surreal.
Yeah.
But I remember I did let out a little like squeal of excitement, but it was also because I saw other names pop up that I was really interested in being on council with. And so it
Okay.
was like, oh my God, like not only do I see my name, but I see names of people that I'm like, oh, this be good, like kind of thing.
Mm,
And then there was maybe one or two polls left, and all of a sudden people started coming up to me saying congratulations, and I'm like, yeah, I get that I'm probably now on council because there's no way anyone like that there'd be that much of a shift in the last two
mhm.
polls, but they're like, no, like you got it, and I was like, no, let me confirm. Let's wait till we see 15 of 15 kind of thing before. And they're like, no. And I'm like, no, no, no. I need to see
I'm the same way.
that that's for sure what it says. And then all of a sudden the cameras, the media, the lights, they're asking me, so what are you going to do? What do you think? How do you feel? And it's like,
I'm not sure yet.
let's do this kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
this great. Like let's be positive, but all at the same time too, it was surreal. It was, and I left and I would just kind of randomly giggle, and people would be like, what? And I'm like, I'm deputy mayor. I got like kind of like, whoa, like, okay, yep, that happened. Yep, okay.
Mhm.
And um just like it was positive, but also like, okay, there's gonna be work, there's gonna be challenges, but all right,
Mhm.
let's do this.
I'm the same way as you because if my hockey team's winning 5-0 in the third period, I'm like, no, shush, just don't say it. There's
Do
still
you cheer
six
for the
minutes.
Leafs?
No, I'm an Oilers
Okay, I was
fan,
gonna.
but
Okay, oh yeah, I was gonna say with the Leafs, don't there's 4 minutes left. Don't turn off the TV thinking they won
yeah,
because you do it the next morning.
what the heck happened? Yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
same way. I
exactly.
don't I don't like to take anything for granted in that regard.
No,
So so you're in council, and people have always said to me, because my friends, because I'm interested in politics and I comment on it, oh, you should run for, and I always say, man, I don't have the temperament for it, because it seems to me everything moves at a glacial pace, and if I've got a cause that I'm interested in and I don't want to wait years and years for this, I would get so frustrated with red tape and
hmm
infighting and blah blah blah. Have you had any issues with dealing with that kind of frustration, or are you more of a, as you mentioned earlier, are you more of a long-term vision type person that knows that that's just the process,
I
or both?
yeah, I think I'm a bit of both. But do you watch Parks and Rec at all?
I have, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I've always been enamored with Leslie Knope, like the character, and how she was just always so gung ho, kind of like, if I don't see this happening, 'cause, I'm going to do it myself, or I'm going to make it happen at my own speed and when I want to see it happen. And I find that so inspiring, but then you get bogged with the legislation and all these other things that get thrown at you, and thinking about, oh, if we do this, what are the other impacts we might not think about in this moment? And it's like, oh yeah, okay, I guess we should, this is a good idea, let's sit on it, let's put out some feelers. But even kind of an example would be, it's just an interesting one. Water bills. We have an option for people to go onto an online portal, pay by e-billing type of thing, no paper billing. The city could save money, and whereby saving the taxpayer some money, if we weren't mailing out physical bills every month. Cool. Okay. Why don't we run a contest? And if people sign up for e-billing, they would be entered into a draw to win, free water for a year and kind of thing. Okay, let's not just, that's a great idea. I think that'd be great. We could really encourage people to do it. We saw North Bay Hydro do it, and they ended up with a lot of people buying in. But let's just think this through a little bit. And so that idea had kind of started to float to the top with some staff members bringing it forward to their director. I would say, oh gosh, early last year, and kind of like put out the feelers to some counselors and some other staff members, like, what do you think about this? Like, would it be perceived well? Would it be seen as, well, I'm paying for someone else's water for it to be free for you? Like, we had to really play devil's advocate, play out all the scenarios, because it could be a really great idea, but if we don't really think through all of those details, you're going to get bit by it.
Mm-hmm.
And, government gets a bad rep quite easily. Like, if any level of government, anyone makes a mistake, good luck shaking it. Like, that's going to be
Especially
then.
today with social media, and there's no
Exactly.
escaping it.
The echo chambers that just continue to fuel narratives. And so I think that partly could be why we even see it stay slow, is just like, let's not just be cautious, let's be even extra cautious. There's some things that we can do quickly, but other times there's just this, we need to play through the scenarios. What's going to be the feedback? What's going to be the perception? What could be the narrative? What could be the consequences? Do other municipalities do it? What were their challenges? What were, just that due diligence pays off, but it slows down everything. So do I want to see things, like, would it be amazing to move things faster because we could be more efficient and effective, and like, if you said this, we have it done the next day? Yeah, that'd be great. But
not if the day after all hell breaks loose.
Exactly. Then suddenly we say, yeah, if you point out that your sidewalk needs this type of repair and we get it done the next day, do we then have 1,000 requests come in the day later? Because
you can't get all to all of them the next day.
Yeah. So it's just, I'm like, ugh, red tape, bureaucracy. But at the same time, it can also just be tied to due diligence. And if a decision's made here, how does it affect other decisions? If we said, let's just say transit was free for everyone, yes, it would hurt our bottom line, but would then people say, well, how come my user fees aren't free? Yeah. How do we justify one versus the other? It's just, I think that was also eye-opening, is like, I kind of go, oh, I got this great idea from a community member. Why don't we do this? That's been brought forward before, Maggie, and we've looked at it. Here's a report on it, and it's like, oh, okay, we could do it, but here's all the other things, financial, legal. narratives that could possibly come along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, okay, all right, yeah, okay, I get it, but also, gosh darn it,
I hate it,
like,
but I get
I hate it.
it.
Yeah, so where we can, and where I think what I'm learning too is also the more we throw at city staff to get done, the more we're watering down their ability to really deliver
Mm-hmm.
on um, faster and on things. So we could be like, here's our list of really great ideas. And they can be like, those are all really great ideas. Here's our personnel. Here's our time in a day. Here's the cost. Pick three.
Mm.
Oh, okay. But they're all really good ideas. So it's like, how do we also prioritize what might be priorities for some, but not for all,
Mm.
and justify we're going to get there. It's just going to take a little while.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that now, obviously, you university graduate, so in university, critical thinking is important. Would you say that your time on council has helped you with your critical thinking skills in regard to what we just talked about? Instead of just saying, "Yeah, this is a great idea, let's do it," you got to do the critical thinking thing where you list the pros and cons, and there's not just one con, there could be 10. That obviously seems like an incredibly important skill to have in government.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel you've improved your critical thinking skills as a result?
Yeah, I think I have, and I think it's interesting because even looking at our council, we all come from different backgrounds, work, life, age, family stat, like everything is very different. And so I think there's that critical thinking piece doesn't just come from going to a university or college. It could be owning your own business, being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's but it is definitely something that really gets finessed with experience. So the more you can expose yourself to situations where you need to think critically and analyze and um, be more a part of those types of conversations, the better you get at it, the more confident you feel through it. And so, even just being on like a local board and getting involved in understanding governance and decision making and how boards operate with an executive director or CEO and that relationship, and when they would come to a board to get advice and how that can translate into politics. And it takes also being exposed to those experiences. And so you can come in green and be, really passionate, um, but you also want to have those skills to be able to think critically and dial into that. And it does take also being exposed to it to improve upon it too.
Mm-hmm. So, first female deputy mayor of North Bay, is that correct?
No, Tanya
No.
Ribosh was
Oh, okay.
previously.
Okay.
Um, I couldn't tell you if there was one before her,
Okay.
but
So,
yeah,
but go ahead.
yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway, just I was just going to ask a question about, you obviously have the personal pride for yourself of reaching this goal, reaching this height, but you also must have some pride, being a woman in this position as well. And how many women are there on council? Is there four or five or
5.
five? So half, right? So.
Hmm.
As a woman, speaking as a woman, that must obviously make you quite proud and happy as well to see that kind of split in the council because it's representative of our population.
Yeah, and I think it's great, and I think we can, just like we're talking about with how we run elections, we can even be better. We could have members from the 2S LGBTQ community. We could have someone who's a recent newcomer to Canada. We like the amount of diversity that we can continue to grow upon to really reflect even more so the fabric of our community. Um, we've made a good stride, and I really want us to continue to see those strides and supporting all walks of life in our community, feeling able to put their name forward, because it's a really personal thing to put your own name, your reputation, yourself out there, and we should really not be allowing those echo chambers and trolls and whoever else to just tear people down, and destroy their confidence or try to make them feel small, because it deters others if we see that's the treatment that we put people through who are willing to be members of our government. And so, yes, we can be critical. That's not something I think we should ever avoid doing, but there's a way in which we need to also make sure it's not belittling, that it's constructive, that you're welcome to disagree. I completely appreciate when people disagree. I don't think we all should agree on everything. It also will probably ever never happen, but the way it's delivered.
Pretty boring too if we all agree on
Exactly. And it's just, if you want to see a true representation of community, we need to be encouraging, be critical, but be respectable as well of how we engage with each other. I find it interesting sometimes when a decision might be made that is deemed controversial because there's equal numbers on each side of an argument, but the people that are in disagreement never reached out, never expressed it to me directly. They've chosen to do so behind a keyboard, behind a screen, and like being anonymous. I'm out here standing behind my name, behind myself publicly. Can you not meet me here too and share with me that you disagree and this is why? And I'm not going to belittle you or troll you or anything. Like, I'm going to say thank you for sharing that. Here's where I see, like, why can't we meet at that respectable level? And so I think that's it's a deterrence, but if we want to truly celebrate and be more diverse on council, and inclusive, we need to be respectful.
And what with the climate today, I think not just I find, but people disagree with someone not because of the idea. It's because this person said the idea. So, if you're a conservative, anything Justin Trudeau says is wrong. If you're a liberal, anything Pierre Poilievre said, and that's just completely unproductive.
Us and them.
Yeah, and it doesn't, you disagree with me just because I'm on this side and you're on that side. That's not a reason to disagree with me on policy, on whatever. And that's got to be, tough people will not be really willing to jump into that and throw their hat into that ring if they're just going to get vitriol all the time. So it takes courage to even throw your hat in the ring for anything like this.
Yeah, and it's been, there's been times where there's a few counselors that I often think like, oh, we think very similar, and we voted differently on things, and afterwards, after the meeting, we're like, we didn't vote the same. Did you see that? And we walk out together. It's not oh, you voted no and I voted yes.
Now you're my enemy.
Yeah, it's
nonsense.
Yeah, we disagreed. That's okay. Doesn't mean that we disagree on everything, or that we can never see eye to eye, or that we'll never vote the same on other things.
Dislike you or anything.
Yeah. It's so I found, like, being able to have a healthy disagreement is so much more productive than trying to just tear the other side, the others down and pitting the us and them narrative.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you for one big challenge you faced since you've been in government, in municipal government, and one thing that's been a triumph for you, if there's anything specific or even just a general kind of answer.
Oh, that's always such a good question. Sometimes it's like you think it'd be really easy to pinpoint these specifics, but a lot of times it's drawn out experiences. And I think where the biggest challenge, I think for me, like we were talking about, is just the speed of things. And the desire to always want to do what is best, or what I think will be best for the community, and then having to weigh all of the other factors of what will others think? Is this what the community wants? What's it going to cost? How we just, that's a challenge. They're not easy decisions that are being made often, and there's just so much more that goes into decisions that are being made by council that aren't just, they might be all in favor, we put up our hands, and you think, oh, that was easy. There's a lot that goes on before votes, oftentimes by councillors, to be informed, to weigh all of those thoughts that go along with a decision. And then I think the biggest accomplishment is I'm really proud of what we're seeing in a shift in how the city is communicating. And it obvious, like with anything, like any organization, any person, communication is such a vital skill and necessity and challenge. And you can always, always, always do better and be better at it. And we're even seeing just through the work that's being done and helping amplify those stories and that information, that communication piece is moving forward. And is there ways that we can be even better at it? Absolutely. Are we working on some of those ways? Definitely. There's just the resources, the person power, everything that goes along with it. But through council, we can offer 11, including the mayor, more voices to helping amplify that message out to the people that voted, the taxpayers, the community. And so, I had someone one time tell me it was because you shared that the city was looking for people to be on the boards for the municipal boards, that I put my name forward and you guys chose me. Like I would never have known that was the time of the year, or that I should put my name forward, and now I'm on this board and I'm loving it. It's like, oh, like you hear little stories like that where it's like, oh, you shared this, or you mentioned this, or I heard you on the radio, or you helped get that message out, that you engaged the community. And if we can continue to communicate, we're going to bring people along and find ways to encourage and inspire others to take pride and be a part of the fabric of our community, and working towards doing that the best we can, trying new ways of doing it. It's going to take time. It's going to be something that there's never an end to. But I think that is going to be the most impactful and, one of the lasting things that we can leave behind as well.
That's great. So one more little anecdote before I let you go. You
Yep.
probably do not remember this because we obviously met at my workplace. We had a meeting, but
Mhm.
before, excuse me, before that, we briefly met at City Hall because I was doing a presentation for work
Yes.
and couldn't find the light switch in the bathroom in City Hall. And I
Oh.
came out sheepishly and asked if you knew. And you said, "Oh, I think it's one of the ones where it turns on by itself." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm a moron." So thank you for helping me see the light, Maggie.
You know what? That's awesome. I wouldn't, now that you mention it, I remember that interaction and I would not have connected all the
Connected the
dots,
dots.
but that's wonderful. And
There you
you were you know, confident enough to ask for help, and
go.
I was there. And yeah, I know that's so funny. I love that. Thanks,
Uh,
Scott.
well, thank you for, like I
Uh,
said, for helping me see.
yeah.
There's none so blind as those who cannot see.
Yes.
But Maggie, I appreciate your time. This has been fascinating. I could go on for another hour or more, but
Yeah,
I
I
know
like
you
to
have.
talk, so
Well, there you go. Maybe there'll be a part two in the future at some point. But
anytime.
after your election for mayor next time
Yeah.
around. Just
Are you
kidding,
gonna work?
Peter. If you're listening,
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say, are you working on my campaign already? No.
I'm in. I'll be your manager. Let's go.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks, Scott.